In 58 BC, Julius Caesar, as governor of Cisalpine Gaul and Transalpine Gaul, launched his first major campaign of the Gallic Wars by confronting the Swaybe, a Germanic confederation led by King Ariovistus in eastern Gaul. This battle, fought near the upper Rhine valley, marked a critical early victory in Caesar's conquest of Gaul. To understand why Caesar was so eager to engage the Swaybe, we need to explore the complex political and military landscape of Gaul, the pressures of Roman politics, and Caesar's personal ambitions. This video will unpack the context, the battle itself, and its far-reaching consequences. Welcome to Channel Name, and let's dive into this pivotal moment in ancient history. Gaul in 58 BC was a region of diverse Celtic tribes, each with its own leaders, territories, and rivalries. Tribes like the Aedui, Sequani, Arverni, and Helvetii competed for dominance, forming shifting alliances or engaging in localized conflicts. The Aedui, based in central Gaul, were Rome's primary allies, valued for their wealth and influence. The Sequani, their neighbors to the east, were a rising power but often clashed with the Aedui over trade routes and territory. Rome maintained a loose influence in Gaul through diplomacy and its province in southern Gaul, Gallia Narbonensis, but the region was far from unified or fully under Roman control. The arrival of the Swaybe disrupted this fragile balance. The Swaybe were not a single tribe, but a confederation of Germanic warrior bands originating east of the Rhine River in what is now southwestern Germany. Led by Ariovistus, a charismatic and ambitious king, they were known for their martial prowess, mobility, and willingness to fight as mercenaries. Around 61 BC, the Sequani, seeking an edge against the Aedui, invited Ariovistus and his warriors to cross the Rhine and intervene in their rivalry. Ariovistus obliged, leading his forces to a decisive victory over the Aedui at the Battle of Magatobriga. The Aedui were humiliated, losing hostages and prestige. However, Ariovistus didn't leave after the victory. Instead, he seized a third of the Sequani's fertile land, likely in the upper Rhine valley, and began settling thousands of Suebi in Gaul. He demanded hostages from the Sequani and other tribes, establishing himself as a dominant power. By 58 BC, Caesar reports in his Commentarii de Bello Gallico that 120,000 Suebi had crossed the Rhine, with more expected. While this figure may be exaggerated for propaganda, it reflects the scale of the Germanic migration. Ariovistus's actions alarmed the Gaulish tribes, who now faced an occupying force that disrupted their economies and autonomy. For Rome, the Suebi's presence was a strategic concern. The Rhine River served as a natural boundary between Roman-allied Gaul and the Germanic tribes. A permanent Germanic foothold west of the Rhine threatened Rome's allies, particularly the Aedui, and risked destabilizing Gallia Narbonensis. Moreover, Ariovistus's growing influence raised fears of a broader Germanic invasion, reminiscent of the Cimbri and Teutones, who had nearly overrun Roman territory in the 100s BC. Julius Caesar's decision to confront the Suebi was driven by a mix of strategic necessity and personal ambition. In 59 BC, Caesar secured the governorship of Cisalpine Gaul, Transalpine Gaul and Illyricum through his alliance with Pompey and Crassus, known as the First Triumvirate. This gave him command of 4 legions, roughly 20,000 men, later expanded to 6 with reinforcements. At 42, Caesar was a skilled politician and general, but his position was precarious. He owed vast sums to creditors, faced opposition from conservative senators like Cato, and needed to outshine his triumvirate partners to secure his future in Rome's competitive elite. The situation in Gaul offered Caesar a chance to achieve military glory, wealth, and loyalty from his troops. His earlier victory over the Helvetii at Bibracte in 58 BC had already demonstrated his capability and earned the gratitude of the Aedui, who appealed to him for help against Ariovistus. The Aedui reported that Ariovistus was holding their nobles hostage, seizing their resources and threatening further expansion. Other tribes, including the Sequani, now regretted inviting the Suebi and sought Roman intervention. Caesar framed the Swaybe as a dire threat to Roman interests. In his Commentarii, he argues that Ariovistus's actions could lead to a Germanic takeover of Gaul, potentially endangering Italy itself. He draws parallels to the Cimbri and Teutones, tapping into Roman fears of barbarian invasions. While these claims served to justify his campaign to the Senate and public, they weren't entirely baseless. Ariovistus's settlement of thousands of warriors suggested a long-term presence that could destabilize the region. However, the situation was complicated by Ariovistus's status. In 59 BC, during Caesar's consulship, the Senate had declared Ariovistus a friend of the Roman people, likely to secure his cooperation against other Germanic tribes. This made military action against him politically risky. Attacking an ally could be seen as reckless or even illegal. Caesar, though, saw the opportunity outweighing the risk. A decisive victory would silence critics, strengthen Rome's grip on Gaul, and provide loot to pay his debts and reward his soldiers. Moreover, it would establish Caesar as the protector of Rome's allies, enhancing his prestige and authority. Before diving into the battle, let's look at the forces involved. Caesar commanded 6 legions totaling about 30,000 legionaries, supported by auxiliary infantry, Gallic cavalry and skirmishers. Roman legions were highly disciplined, equipped with chainmail, helmets, shields and the pilum, a heavy javelin designed to disrupt enemy formations. Their tactics emphasized flexibility, with legions deployed in a triple-line formation, triplex aces, that allowed reserves to reinforce weak points. Caesar's officers like Publius Crassus and Titus Labienus were experienced, and his Gallic allies provided crucial cavalry and local knowledge. The Swaybe, under Ariovistus, fielded a large but less organized force, possibly 30,000 to 50,000 warriors, including Swaybe, Harudes, Marcomanni and other tribes. Exact numbers are uncertain, as Caesar's estimates may be inflated. The Swaybe relied on infantry fighting in dense shield wall formations with long spears, swords and minimal armor. Their cavalry was limited, and they lacked the Romans' engineering or logistical systems. However, their warriors were renowned for endurance and ferocity, often fighting to protect their families who traveled with the army in wagon trains. The presence of these families camped nearby motivated the Suebi to stand their ground. In the summer of 58 BC, Caesar marched his army from Bibracte toward the Sequanes territory, likely modern Alsace or Franche-Comté, aiming to confront Ariovistus. He first attempted diplomacy, sending envoys to request a meeting. Ariovistus agreed, but was uncompromising. He claimed his presence in Gaul was legitimate, invited by the Sequani, and that his conquests were his right. He dismissed Roman interference, reportedly boasting that his warriors were invincible and hinting that some Roman elites might prefer him as an ally over Caesar. This defiance, recorded in Caesar's Commentarii, was a direct challenge to Roman authority. When negotiations failed, Caesar learned that additional Suebi were crossing the Rhine, possibly to join Ariovistus. Fearing a larger Germanic force, he acted swiftly. He captured Vesontio, modern Besancon, a fortified Sequani town, to secure his supply lines and establish a base. However, his troops grew anxious. Rumors circulated about the Suebi's size, strength, and terrifying reputation. Some soldiers, particularly newer recruits, feared defeat in Gaul's dense forests. Caesar addressed the crisis with a rousing speech recounted in his Commentarii. He praised his army's discipline, reminded them of their victory over the Helvetii, and declared he would march against Ariovistus even if alone. The speech restored confidence, and the army pressed on. The battle likely occurred in late summer 58 BC in the Upper Rhine Valley near modern Mulhouse or Colmar, though the exact site remains uncertain. Caesar's scouts reported that Ariovistus had assembled his forces in an open plain bordered by forests and hills. The Suebi formed tribal units, each under its own leader and banner, with their families and wagons encamped nearby. A tactic to inspire resolve, but also a vulnerability if defeated. Caesar deployed his 6 legions in the triplex aces, with auxiliaries and Gallic cavalry on the flanks. He personally commanded the right wing, a sign of his hands-on leadership. Ariovistus arranged his warriors in a broad front, likely aiming to overwhelm the Romans with a massed charge. The terrain offered no clear advantage, but the Suebi's numbers and momentum posed a serious threat. As the battle began, the Suebi charged with a deafening war cry, aiming to break the Roman line through sheer force. The Romans responded with a volley of pila, which pierced shields and disrupted the Suebi's formation. The legions then advanced, engaging in close combat with gladii, short swords, and shields. The Roman right wing, under Caesar, gained ground, pushing back the Suebi's left. However, the Roman left wing struggled against the Herudis, a fierce tribe led by one of Ariovistus's lieutenants. The Herudis' relentless pressure threatened to collapse the Roman line. The battle's turning point came when Publius Crassus, commanding the cavalry and reserves, noticed the Suebi's overextension. He led a rapid counterattack, likely a combination of cavalry and auxiliary infantry, to reinforce the Roman left. This maneuver stabilized the line and allowed the Romans to exploit gaps in the Suebi's formation. As the Roman right continued its advance, the Suebi's cohesion faltered, panic set in, and their line broke. The rout was merciless. Caesar's troops pursued the fleeing Suebi, slaughtering warriors and overrunning their camp. The families in the wagon train faced capture or death, a grim fate common in ancient warfare. Ariovistus escaped, reportedly crossing the Rhine with a small group, but his army was effectively destroyed. Roman losses were moderate thanks to their discipline and Crassus's timely intervention. The victory had profound effects. Ariovistus's defeat ended the Suebi's presence west of the Rhine, forcing survivors to retreat eastward. The Sequani and Iudui were freed from Germanic oppression, cementing their dependence on Rome. Caesar wintered his legions in Gaul, signaling his intent to remain and expand Roman control. The campaign enriched Caesar and his men as they looted the Suebi's camp and secured tribute from grateful tribes. In Rome, the victory bolstered Caesar's reputation. His dispatches, which became the Commentarii de Bello Gallico, portrayed the Swaybe as a barbarian threat, justifying his actions and deflecting criticism over attacking a Roman friend. The Senate, though wary of his growing power, celebrated the triumph. For the Gauls, the battle marked a shift toward Roman dominance, as tribes increasingly relied on Caesar for protection. The battle against the Suebi was a catalyst for the Gallic Wars, which lasted until 50 BC. By removing the Germanic threat, Caesar secured eastern Gaul, enabling campaigns against the Belgae, Nervae, and later Vercingetorix's revolt. The Rhine became a symbolic boundary, though Germanic tribes would challenge it in later centuries, notably during the Augustan era.